හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 29th of November 2023. Debt met. Sri Lanka's official creditor committee agrees in principle to restructure the country's debt, paving the way for the IMF's second tranche. Beggar identity. President Wickremesinghe warns against Sri Lanka remaining a beggar nation, constantly borrowing in a hard-hitting statement at the 2023 Economic Summit. New IGP. Deshabandhu Tennakon appointed as the new acting Inspector General of Police after much controversy over the post. Election issues. Former CBSL governor warns against elections derailing IMF programs as it has historically occurred in the past. Treasure trove. The Dutch government officially hands over Sri Lankan artifacts of immeasurable value over 100 years after it was looted from Sri Lanka's shores.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to AdaDerana's English News First at 9. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our news stories for the day, starting with our top story right now. The official creditor committee confirmed its in-principle agreement on specific financing terms to restructure Sri Lanka's debt in line with the parameters set by the International Monetary Fund. This development comes 1.5 months after China agreed in principle to restructure $4.2 billion of debt. The Ministry of Finance stated that the agreement in principle covers approximately $5.9 billion of outstanding public debt and consists of a mix of long-term maturity extension and reduction in interest rates. According to the Paris Club, this agreement will allow the IMF staff to present to the IMF Executive Board the first review of Sri Lanka's external funding facility arrangement and pave the way for approval of the second disbursement under the arrangement. In April of 2023, 17 countries formally formed an official creditor committee co-chaired by India, Japan and France as chair of the Paris Club to respond to the Sri Lankan authorities' request for debt treatment. In addition to Paris Club members, the committee includes India and Hungary. According to the Paris Club, the official creditor committee, since its establishment, engaged extensively with Sri Lankan authorities, the IMF, the World Bank, as well as China and Sri Lanka's private creditors. In a statement today, the Paris Club said that the official creditor committee and Sri Lanka agreed on the main parameters of a debt treatment consistent with those of the extended fund facility arrangement between Sri Lanka and the IMF. The Paris Club said that this agreement would allow the IMF staff to present the IMF Executive Board the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF arrangement and pave the way for approval of the second disbursement under the arrangement. According to the Ministry of Finance, the agreement in principle covers approximately $5.9 billion of outstanding public debt and consists of a mix of long-term maturity extension and reduction in interest rates. The Paris Club said that the official creditor committee stands ready and awaits the formalizing of the agreement in the coming weeks in a memorandum of understanding with Sri Lankan authorities. The OCC said that they expect other bilateral creditors to consent by sharing transparently the information necessary for them to evaluate the comparability of treatment regarding their own bilateral agreement. The official creditor committee also expects that Sri Lankan authorities will continue to engage with their private creditors to expeditiously search for an agreement on terms at least as favorable as the terms offered by them. Following the agreement with the official creditor committee on debt treatment, State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinga said that this agreement is another important indicator of the continued cooperation and support of the global community in Sri Lanka's economic recovery. In a next message, the minister stated that this is a very significant milestone and added that a similar agreement in principle was provided earlier by the China Exim Bank. He stated that both agreements confirm that all official creditors have agreed to restructure Sri Lanka's debt, which is a major step in the resolution of Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Semasinga added that the official creditor committee's agreement now paves the way for the IMF board to consider the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF program and unlock the next tranche of IMF funding expected in December, which in turn would enable the World Bank and Asian Development Bank to provide further financing. Semasinga highlighted that Sri Lanka remains committed to the implementation of the comprehensive reform program that will restore macroeconomic stability and place the country on a path of sustainable and inclusive economic growth. He stated that subsequently Sri Lanka, through its financial advisors, will continue to engage with its external private sector creditors in order to reach a similar agreement in principle.
එවැගේම අපේ මූල්‍ය උපදේශකයන් විසින් නීති උපදේශකයන් විසින් පෞද්ගලික ණය හිමියන් සමග ඒ කියන්නේ ISP holders සමග මේ සාකච්ඡාව ඉස්සරහට ගෙනියලා උන් සමගත් එකගතාවයක් ඇති කරගනීවි. ඒ හින්දා අද මූලික එකගතාවයක් නැති නැති වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේක තමයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. රජය විසින් ලබා දීපු එකඟතා සියල්ල සම්පූර්ණ කිරීමේ එක සම්දිස්ථානයක් තමයි මේ පසු කරන්නේ. ඒ හින්දා අපිට බංකොලොත් භාවයෙන් ඉවත් වීමට අවශ්‍ය සියලුම පදනම මේ වෙනකොට සකස් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe stressed the imperative need for radical economic restructuring to ensure sustainability of the country's economy. However, his most striking comment was when he warned that Sri Lanka's modus operandi of constantly borrowing money as opposed to enhancing its own industry, whether via commerce or exports, will keep Sri Lanka trapped in a beggar mentality that will direct the nature of the country's fortunes for the future. The President emphasized that continuous commitment to a new economic policy framework is essential to avoid a recurring economic loss. Delivering the keynote at the 2023 Economic Summit, he questioned whether transformative measures taken could be labelled as mere reforms, asserting that the changes implemented were more accurately described as a radical restructure with no possibility of reversal.
The Economic Summit organised by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce commenced yesterday in Colombo. Delivering the keynote address of the summit, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who laid out the developments of the debt restructuring program, emphasized the necessity of adhering to the agreed upon framework, stressing that deviation could lead to adverse consequences with creditors.
I don't know whether what we've done can be called reform. This is not reform. It's a restructuring and a radical restructuring. And there's no going back. What is taking place now is something that can't be turned back. We've got to work within this new policy frame. We have made significant progress in the efforts to restructure its debt in order to restore debt sustainability. The government, along with its financial and legal advisors, have been engaged in good faith negotiations with all its creditors over the last several months. All creditor groups have been very cooperative and constructive in their engagement with us. With regard to the official creditors, Sri Lanka engaged in negotiations with the official creditor committee and in parallel with China Exim Bank. Contrary to many expectations, Sri Lanka has been able to successfully navigate this process. With this, we expect that the IMF board will be in a position to conclude the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF program within the month of December. We are mainly relying on a long-term extension of the debt. But what does this mean? The economic principles on which we will operate for the future is what has gone into this net negotiation. If we go away from it, then the creditors are entitled to act. Then I thought to myself, look, if I don't do this, no one is going to do it. And next time, if I don't have this system, we don't have a long-term agreement, the next government, someone will want to turn it back and give the goodies. We can't be auctioning non-existing resources all the time. These are decisions I had to take in private. You want me to have a consensus. How can I have consensus with people who ran away and didn't take responsibility? For how long are we going to be a bigger nation? That's why we are the Sri Lankan. Are we going to be beggars, going and asking other people to help us out each time because we didn't do our maths correctly, because we are not willing to export, because we are not willing to be competitive? So we are asking other people, other countries to give their taxpayers money because we had it wrong. You can't go on like this. For us, this is the last chance. Either we've got to take it or bust it. With this framework, we are entering into a new political era also. Everyone has to make their policies within it. If they are going to break it, they must tell the country. I can give it to you in writing. If you go on like this, you will have another crisis within 10 years, maybe earlier. We are having free trade agreements, which means in the next 5 to 15 years, tariffs will have to be adjusted and that will have to be downward.
Because we have seen previously also when elections are announced, elections are conducted, these directions change. So I know you mentioned that. I thought I'll leave that remark to you to answer that question. You should
ask Dr. Harsha. No, we have this on ground. This is the agreement. Do you agree or not? That's all. If you don't agree, you tell the country. So most will fall in line with the agreement, I think. There will be a few who will. The country will have to decide. My assessment, country is going along with the IMF. Whatever the difficulties are, people know we are getting out of it. And situation is slightly better than earlier. No one is saying it's that good. But they know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. Maybe we'll get there in electric car and not a fuel-driven one. But I don't think, I think they're very good at the next elections for them to come and say we'll bring all this down. Good. But remember one thing, though former President Gotabaya is getting blamed for reducing taxes, all you guys agreed to it.
I never expected that from you. I didn't expect that answer anyway.
Former central bank governor and member of the Presidential Advisory Group on Multilateral Engagement and Debt Sustainability, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, says that Sri Lanka in the past lost a decent foundation achieved via the IMF programs due to elections. Addressing a symposium in Colombo, the former CBSL governor said that even though Sri Lanka is expected to achieve a positive growth in the fourth quarter this year, it will take at least 3 years for the country to achieve its previous growth levels from way back in 2021.
The symposium Poverty Alleviation in an Era of Economic Crisis, organized by the Center for Poverty Analysis, commenced this morning in Colombo. During the event, the keynote address of the inaugural session, Macroeconomic Implications and the Way Forward for Sri Lanka, was delivered by former central bank governor and member of the Presidential Advisory Group on Multilateral Engagement and Debt Sustainability, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy.
IMF programs, we start off by doing well. We take the medicine, we stabilize the economy up to a point, and by the time when we are beginning to create a decent foundation, an election approaches and the discipline goes. Now, I must be very clear. Last time I said this in a webinar, people thought I was saying that election should be postponed. I am not saying that. No way will I ever advocate breaching the Constitution. All I'm saying is we need to behave better. Our politicians need to behave better, and we as a people need to behave better and make it very clear to our politicians that all this kind of nonsense that they do to bribe us is in the end going to come back and bite us through higher inflation. So what they give with one hand, they take away, more than take away with another through these policies. Sri Lanka has done extremely well in the last 18 months. In terms of the macro indicators, when the Census and Statistics puts the third quarter growth up, it might be marginally positive or just below. So from -10 last year, -11 in the first quarter of this year, -3 in the second quarter, hopefully we might just about get into positive territory for the third quarter. And in the fourth quarter, there is strong confidence in the central bank that we will have positive growth. But remember, we've lost 10% of peak to trough GDP. So it will take us about 3 years just to catch up to where we were in 2021. So anyway, but we're going into growth territory. Inflation from 70 to 1.5. It'll go up now with a little bit with the VAT and also as the base effects of that very high inflation begins to fall off. But the central bank is confident. And one thing is, I must say, present governor was senior deputy governor in the time I was in the central bank, and I was enormously reliant on his central banking skills. He is an extremely knowledgeable central banker, top class. So he will do what is necessary. And he did exactly the right thing. He hit inflation very hard up front, and he was criticized for it. But today he has brought inflation down to 1.5%. Nobody expected, the IMF, nobody expected to achieve this level of stabilization as far as the inflation rate is concerned.
In other news, 6 artifacts of Sri Lankan origin looted by the Dutch in 1765 during the siege of the Kandyan Palace were returned to Sri Lanka by the government of Netherlands this morning. Following the return of the artifacts, it was announced that the Kandyan artifacts will be exhibited at the Colombo National Museum during the first week of December this year. Additionally, the Ministry of Buddha Sasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs stated that more artifacts which had been looted from Sri Lanka in the past will be returned to the country in the future.
Earlier this year, the government of Netherlands announced the decision to return 6 Sri Lankan artifacts, which was housed in the prestigious Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam in Netherlands. Following collaborative international research which concluded in April last year, the 6 Sri Lankan objects from the Rijksmuseum collection were confirmed to be of Sri Lankan origin. It was further established that the artifacts were obtained by the Dutch in 1765 during the siege of the Kandyan Palace, where a great deal of Kandyan objects were looted. Later, during a high-level state visit in August this year, Dutch State Secretary for Culture and Media Guneus Loof formally signed an ownership transfer of the 6 Sri Lankan artifacts looted by the Dutch in 1765. Accordingly, after more than 200 years, the 6 Kandyan artifacts, including the notable Leuke Disavis cannon, a gold castane or ceremonial sword, a Sinhalese knife, a silver castane and 2 wall guns, were physically returned to Sri Lanka today. The artifacts were ceremoniously received by the Minister of Buddha Sasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs Vidura Wickramanayake at the Bandaranaike International Airport in Katunayake this morning. Further, a group of officials, including the Ambassador of Netherlands to Sri Lanka, Bonnie Horbach, were also present at the event. Accordingly, the Dutch ambassador to Sri Lanka handed over the legal documents of the 6 artifacts to Subject Minister Vidura Wickramanayake, where the documents were then handed over to the Director of the Department of National Museums in Sri Lanka.
At this juncture, we are pleased and happy, delighted indeed, to receive the first batch of artifacts that was taken to Netherlands by force. Nevertheless, the Netherlands government has been very considerate to give back those artifacts which belongs to Sri Lanka. And this is the first batch, including Leuke Disaves cannon. So we hope people should be given a chance to see them, and starting from December 5th, the exposition will take place at the museum, Colombo Museum.
This is a moment of great significance for both our countries, Sri Lanka and the Netherlands, to bring back these wonderful objects, these artifacts, after 200 years to its rightful owners. I'm very honored to have played a very small role to undo this historical injustice that has been done to Sri Lanka. And I hope together with everybody, because it has been an effort of a lot of people, to also look forward and see what else we can and we must return to Sri Lanka. Objects that are still in our state collection. But today is a milestone, the first step in a process that will continue hopefully for a longer time. But at least what we do see today is that we have made a step towards a new kind of cooperation, cultural cooperation.
Later, measures were taken to place the historic artifacts at the Colombo National Museum. The artifacts were stored under similar environmental conditions found in Netherlands. After returning the historic artifacts back to its country of origin, an announcement was made that a 2-day exhibition of these artifacts will follow at the Colombo National Museum during the first week of December.
මේ අතිවිශේෂ කෞතුක භාණ්ඩ 6 දෙසැම්බර් 5 වෙනිදා ඉඳලා ජාතික කෞතුකාගාරයේ පැවැත්වෙන විශේෂ ප්‍රදර්ශනයකින් මහජනතාවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න අපි කටයුතු කරමින් ඉන්නවා.
In other news, Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police, Deshabanda Tennakon, who oversees the Western Province, has been appointed Acting Inspector General of Police. A statement by the Police Media Division said that the appointment was made by President Ranil Wickremesinghe pursuant to powers vested with him. Accordingly, Senior DIG Tennakon will serve as the Acting IGP for a period of 3 months.
Former Inspector General of Police C.D. Wickramaratne was scheduled to retire from his position on 25th of March. However, his service was extended by President Ranil Wickremesinghe 4 times. The Constitutional Assembly did not approve the 4th extension of service given to him, and he had intimated that he would retire after the extension of service ended last Friday. Accordingly, Senior DIG Nilanda Jayawardena, Senior DIG Lalit Patinayaka and Senior DIG Deshabanda Tennakon were nominated for the position based on their experience and seniority. Today, President Wickremesinghe appointed Senior DIG Deshabanda Tennakon as the acting IGP for a period of 3 months.
මගේ ප්‍රමුඛතා ලැයිස්තුවේ පළවෙනි එක තියෙන්නේ ජාතික ආරක්ෂාව සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි කරන කාර්යයන්. ඒකට විශේෂයෙන් අපි උනන්දුවක් දක්වන්න ඕන. දෙවැනි මගේ ප්‍රමුඛතාවය තමයි රටේ මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය තත්ත්වය තුරන් කිරීම සම්බන්ධව. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි කවුරුත් දන්නවා අද ගන්ධනම් වල ඒ වගේම පාසල් දරුවන්ටත් විශාල ගැටලුවක් වෙලා තියෙන මේ හැමතැනම පැතිරලා තියෙන මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය. ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ලොකු ප්‍රමුඛතාවයක් සහ මගේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක් තියෙනවා. ඒ සම්බන්ධව මම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. එක් සංවිධානාත්මක අපරාධ වලින් ඇති වෙලා තියෙන තර්ජනය කප්පන් වගේ දේවල් සම්බන්ධව ක්‍රියා කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒවා තමයි මගේ ප්‍රමුඛතා ලැයිස්තුවේ ඉහළින්ම තියෙන්නේ.
Meanwhile, the Catholic Church expressed their objection towards the appointment of Senior DIG Deshabanda Tennakon as the new acting IGP of Police. Addressing a media briefing today, spokesperson of the Colombo Archdiocese, Reverend Cyril Gamini, said that the Catholic Church considers this appointment an insult to the victims of the Easter Sunday attack.
ජනාධිපතිවරයා ලෙස රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්මයා කළ එම පත්වීම අතියුතුම් මැල්කම් කාඩිනල් රංජිත් හිමිපාණන් ඉතාමත්ම පිළිකුලෙන් යුතුව හෙලා දකින්න. ඒ වගේම එය අපි දැඩි ලෙස ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරන. මේ පත්කිරීම පාස්කු ඉරිදා ප්‍රහාරයේ වින්දිතයින්ට විරුද්ධව සිදු කළ විශාලම අවමානය ලෙසයි අපි දකින්න. විශේෂ නමක් නෑ යෝජනා කරන්න. ඒක ජනාධිපතිවරයා විසින් යෝජනා කරන්න ඕනේ නම ව්‍යවස්ථාදායක සභාවට. මේ පත්කිරීම මගින් නම් රටේ විනය සහ සාමය නෙමෙයි අඩු ගානේ පොලිසිය විනයවත් ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න පුළුවන් වේද කියලා සැකයක් තියෙනවා.
Welcome back. The Colombo Stock Exchange closed in green today, with markets responding to the news that creditor nations agreed in principle on debt restructuring treatment for Sri Lanka. The Colombo Stock Exchange all-share price index closed up 0.58% to close at 10,513.28 points, its strongest session since the 8th of November. Ceylon Tobacco Company and Brown's Investments were the top gainers on the index, up 2.49% and 2.04% respectively. Trading volume on the ASPI rose to 36.4 million shares from 19.5 million shares in the previous session. The S&P SL20 meanwhile rose by 0.24%, ending at 2,977.76 points. Market turnover rose to 735.6 million rupees from 724.5 million rupees in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers offloading stocks worth 56.1 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers purchasing shares worth 696.4 million rupees. Up next is Udish and Jonas from Capital Alliance with some thoughts on the current status of the economy of the country in our next segment, Sri Lanka's Economic Outlook.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka cut policy rates by 100 basis points at last week's monetary policy meeting, citing that inflation had stabilized and the need for economic stimulus. However, the central bank also indicated that inflation going into 2024 might edge up above their 5 to 7% trajectory owing to the increase in value-added tax rates and the removal of VAT exemptions on most products. However, secondary market bond yields did not respond to the reduction in terms of policy rates, but the subsequent treasury bond auction, which was held this week, saw the 45 billion auction being subscribed for 40 billion rupees, with the 5-year tenor paper being accepted at a range of 14.48% to 14.52%. The treasury bill auction, which was held today, also saw the 3-month treasury bill rates fall by 43 basis points and the 12-month treasury bill rates falling by 5 basis points. On more important news, Sri Lanka and the Official Creditor Committee has agreed on a debt restructuring deal, which was communicated by the Paris Club Secretariat today. This means that the bilateral lenders will agree on more or less an extension on principal debt repayments, but the talk is that there won't be any principal haircut as such. The full details of the agreement is yet to be disclosed. The agreement would mean that IMF would be looking at approving the second tranche of its disbursement in the upcoming 6th December board meeting, which will allow Sri Lanka to draw down roughly about $330 million in terms of funding from the IMF. The good news is also that this will activate funding from other bilateral lenders or multilateral lenders, such as the ADB, which is looking at a $400 million funding within the next 4 to 5 months of 2024. From the currency perspective, we saw the Sri Lankan rupee depreciate to about 329 rupees to the dollar, and we feel the reason for this is because the banks building their dollar reserves in anticipation that they can take their ISB positions in rupees rather than taking massive haircuts on dollar positions as such, which will mean that going into the next few weeks we may see further depreciation of the currency as the banks aggressively build their reserve positions. From a tourism perspective, we are looking at tourism numbers for November crossing somewhere around the 155,000 mark, and for December numbers look encouraging, with numbers likely to cross 210 to 220,000 arrivals in the month of December.
With that, let's look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies as the day progressed. Amana Bank recently listed its rights issue shares on the Colombo Stock Exchange, which was marked by the ceremonial bell ringing on Friday to commence market trading. Meanwhile, Commercial Bank announced that it has moved to Google Workspaces in collaboration with fintech consultancy from September of this year. With that, let's take a quick look at news from the corporate sector today. Amana Bank recently listed its rights issue shares on the Colombo Stock Exchange, which was marked by the ceremonial bell ringing on Friday to commence market trading. Being one of the largest rights issues in the recent past, Amana Bank raised 6 billion rupees with the participation of existing and new shareholders, featuring strong foreign corporate and high net worth investors. CSE Chief Executive Officer Rajiva Bandarnaik said that this issue drew interest from both local investors and foreign investors, which is important in today's context, where the country requires foreign investors in listed companies. In a bid to improve its efficiency and productivity, the largest private bank in the country, Commercial Bank Limited, today announced that it has moved to Google Workspaces in collaboration with fintech consultancy from September of this year. As a result of the availability of various tools in Google Workspace, it serves to assist commercial bank employees to better serve its customers. The Google Workspace concept includes security and compliance features which also assist Commercial Bank Limited to protect its data. Meanwhile, H&B plc renewed its partnership with Expo Property Developers Private Limited to provide prospective homeowners with tailored and concessionary rates for apartments at the Expo Grand Condominium Complex. Accordingly, a memorandum of understanding was signed at the special ceremony. Special interest rate benefits were also provided to its customers during the promotional period. That's all the news I have for you for now. I'm Jonathan Benedict. See you again tomorrow. Good night and God bless.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.